total destruction of the critical infrastructure of countries, that means they will collapse. These countries will fall apart within hours, maybe at most days. I'm not answering your question, but I'll get to that shortly. Iran, prior to the 12-day war, Iran it knew that the United States was going to attack, but they negotiated anyway because they wanted to show Iranians and the international community that the trouble is not Iran, it's the United States. Some people say that's useless, a useless endeavor, but I think the opposite is correct. Before this war, the Americans again used negotiations as a means of deception, but the Iranians weren't deceived. What they did do again was show the international community and Iranians, some Iranians who may have asked, well, or wondered what if we had negotiated? Maybe there wouldn't have been a war. So Iran made sure that, as they say in the United States, all bases are covered, so that there are later on no one can blame Iran for war. And of course, the MOU, the Iranians knew, and we've discussed this together on your show, and we've discussed all of these things in over the last year, more than a year. But during the MOU, when the MOU was signed, Iran knew that the United States would violate it. They knew that the United States would most probably undermine it. But the Iranians used the MOU as a means to prepare itself for the next stage. They had tens of millions of barrels of oil in tankers waiting, stuck in the Persian Gulf. They sold them, brought in necessary supplies. It's a country of 90-some million people. You have to take care of your people. So it wasn't because Iran was naive. It was because Iran was being both moral, but also careful to make sure that the United States lost the international community and popular and the hearts and minds of people across the world, and that Iran would be able to take advantage of different opportunities that came about. But so all of that aside, right now we're at a place where no one knows what's going to happen next. The United States, we do not trust the United States. No one trusts the United States. So, and the United States has gone quiet for the last 3 days. Now, why has the United States gone quiet? I don't know. I really don't know. I, of course, have read the different reports that have come out that senior officials in the United States have warned Trump about escalation and about continued war, about the shortages in the military, about the cost, and I'm sure about the crisis, the global economic crisis, because as we speak, the strait is still closed. The Strait of Hormuz is not open. So the shortages, the global shortages are growing. And then the Red Sea, of course, has been added to the problem for the United States. And we've seen Ansarullah in Yemen take out key Saudi installations. So the situation is growing more difficult literally by the minute for the US economy, for the Western economies, and of course for all of us, for the global economy. So while there's no shooting, but it's not as if things are back to normal. The strait is closed. Both straits are closed, at least in the Red Sea, in Bab el-Mandab for the Saudis. So the question is, what are the Americans planning? Is it truly what these journalists are saying, or these reports are saying, that Trump is being told that this is it's not a good idea to continue, or is the United States preparing for an escalation? We don't know. The Iranians believe that it's quite possible that the United States may choose one of 4, let's say, options. One is to end the war and to seek a solution. But if we go down that route, or any other route, ultimately, the Iranians will not accept the previous MOU. The Iranians will want certain things up front, and the MOU or any agreement will have to include other things such as Yemen and Gaza more explicitly than before. So Iran will be more demanding. And as I said, Iran will demand some things before they even begin. implementing anything, or otherwise the strait is going to remain as it is. And this is not a situation where which Western economies can ignore. So one is to de-escalate. The second is to restart the bombing. If that happens, we're going to have the status quo continue. The global economy will continue to deteriorate, and there will be no achievement by the United States. The third option and the fourth option are sort of similar in that one would be carry out massive strikes across the country, and the other would be to carry out a land campaign in the Persian Gulf, or maybe some crazy adventure to take a mountain near Isfahan or near Qom, or a combination of both. And that would, of course, lead to massive responses by Iran and immediate responses. It would lead to the total destruction of the critical infrastructure of countries in the Persian Gulf that have assisted the United States in this war, meaning Kuwait, the Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, and Bahrain, and perhaps Oman now, after their involvement in bringing about the second phase in this war by helping the Americans launch that corridor. And if Iran destroys these countries, that means they will collapse. These countries will fall apart within hours, maybe at most days. And that would cause panic across the global economy. Trump will no longer be able to talk and manipulate the markets. That will be over. The situation, the shortages are already there. And then when people see images of burning oil fields and oil and gas facilities across the region, they'll know that it's over. Then it's all over. So you'll see Western economies collapse. That's what would happen if the United States moved towards 3 or 4, meaning a major air campaign or some sort of invasion or combination of the two. That the Iranians will not hold back at all. It'll be over. And we already see what Yemen can do to Saudi Arabia. And what Iran can do is far, far, far greater than what Yemen can do. And of course, there's Iraq and the resistance in Iraq. So we don't know, but Iran is prepared for the worst and waiting to see where Trump wants to take this.
Is that going to be, let's assume the talks happening or the messages between the two sides back and forth. What would be the role of Yemen? Are they going to be part of negotiations, the talks between the United States and Iran?
Oh, no doubt. No doubt. Yemen was very smart. It was a very smart move. They chose a time when the Strait of Hormuz was closed to say that an end must be brought about to the siege on the people of Yemen. These people have been besieged for well over a decade, with the help of literally all countries in our region, meaning the Saudis, the Emiratis, the Qataris, Turkey, Egypt. All of them from the very beginning were on the same page when it came to the genocidal attacks on Yemen. When the Saudis and the Emiratis launched the war against the people of Yemen. And Yemen persevered. And for years they fought back, and ultimately they created their own missile and drone capabilities. And they started striking Saudi oil infrastructure, and that led to the ceasefire. But the siege is still in place. This must come to an end now. You can no longer strangle our people. And this is the best opportunity, because when the Strait of Hormuz is closed, then the impact of the closure of the Red Sea becomes much greater. If Yemen had done this, let's say, during the MOU or before the war had started, the impact would have been significant, but much less, because most Saudi oil and its petrochemical products or refined products come from the Persian Gulf. But now that it's shut, and now that the global markets are near crisis because of 5 months of accumulative shortages, this is the best moment to grab the Saudi regime by the neck and say, you must give us our rights. And the Saudis gave them the perfect uh, the perfect excuse. When the Iranians sent a plane to return the Yemeni delegation, well, they sent a plane to pick up the Yemeni delegation, breaking this immoral and illegal siege. The Saudis, their jets moved towards the airport. Air defenses, uh, from what I read, forced them back. Then, when the delegation was returning to Sana'a, the capital, the Saudis bombed the airport, outraging Iran, but carrying out an act of war against the people of Yemen. So that allowed Yemen to retaliate. And then, of course, it led to the massive strike on Saudi oil installations. So, and of course, the shutting of the Strait of Hormuz. So, the Strait of the Bab al Mandab Strait. So, this is an ideal moment for Yemen. Their act carries far greater weight today than it would have at any other time. And of course, it has huge benefits for Iran too, because it increases the impact that Iran is creating against the Americans through controlling the Strait of Hormuz. So it just shows that the axis of resistance, it is a very effective and powerful alliance. And Ayatollah Khamenei, the martyr who created this, and General Soleimani, the martyr who uh, created this alongside him, we now see how important it is, just as important as the missiles and drones themselves, and the underground missile and drone cities that have been created in Iran and Yemen. And of course, the resistance in Iraq is still not. They're still waiting for the right moment, for escalation. They are a force far greater than even Hezbollah in number, and they have access to sophisticated weapons. So this is not a war that the United States can win. Although you're not going to hear much about this in the Western media, just as we didn't hear much about it in the Yemeni attacks on Saudi oil installations. It seems as if Western media, even those that oppose Trump, they want to downplay the situation. But the situation is uh, very critical for Trump and the United States and the West. Well, Yemen didn't preempt the Saudis, as I pointed out. They carried out an airstrike on Sana'a International Airport to prevent the Iranian passenger plane from landing. And therefore, that gave Yemen the opportunity to strike. Although, even if Yemen had just attacked without the Saudis carrying out this strike, it would still have been legitimate and not preemptive, because they've imposed a siege on a big country of Yemen, a siege on women and children, and it's been going on for years. This is war, and it's illegal, and the West supports it, and so do these regional regimes. We see how, for example, but Yemen had every right to carry out this attack, and but Yemen, I don't. This is not a preemptive attack, and I don't see Iran as carrying out a preemptive attack, even though Iran could attack, because the Americans have created and imposed a siege on Iran, and so that is an act of war. But again, I don't think Iran is going to do that. I think that Iran will wait to see if the United States wants to de-escalate. If it does, Iran will move in that direction. But of course, an agreement will not look like the MOU. It'll be the Iranians will make more demands, and as I said earlier, they'll make certain demands up front. I don't see the United States or Trump in particular accepting that. And if the United States wishes to renew the war, Iran will renew striking back, and of course, Iran will hit the United States harder. And so far, during the last 2 weeks of fighting that we saw until this pause, the Iranians have hit the Americans harder than the Americans have hit Iran. I think it's clear by now to everyone. And then if the United States wants to escalate, then it's all-out war. and that will be the end. The map will change on the Arabian Peninsula, and it will change elsewhere because when things collapse, other countries will collapse with it. Jordan will collapse. Across the world, there will be chaos because there will be global economic depression. It's not just in our region from, Turkey to, I don't know, to Sudan, or from Egypt to India and Pakistan. This will affect Latin America. It'll affect Africa. It'll affect uh, Europe. It will be devastating North America. It will devastate the world. So hopefully the world won't go there, but it really all depends on Trump and Netanyahu and the Zionists. And of course, Netanyahu is on his way to the United States to see if he can bring the global economy to collapse.
The next escalation, it could be the oil facilities, desalination plants. Is the United States, in your opinion, planning to go that far? That would be hugely devastating for the whole region.
Well, first of all, we have to remember that the U.S. proxies in the region, they are far more dependent on desalination plants than Iran. As you know, maybe 1% of Iranians are dependent on desalination plants. In those countries, these 6 countries, if you include Oman, it's almost 100%. It's 70% and above. I'm not sure about Oman, their numbers, but beyond Oman, it's almost 100%. Some will say 70%, 80%. It's roughly 100%, I think. And the and also another thing is that Iran has electrical power plants across the country, and those who maintain Iranian power plants are all Iranian. And most of the material that power plants need are produced in Iran. So, and those but in the Persian Gulf region, they have massive power plants. But and there are they're much larger and fewer in number. And so it's much easier for Iran to take out their power plants than it is for the United States to do this to Iran. And if they take them out, then the supplies come from abroad. The workers, I'm sure many of them won't stay, are no longer there, won't stay. I mean, such a battle, such a war, if the United States escalates, will be very painful for Iran. But Iran is going to remain steadfast, and it will bring an end to the regimes in the Persian Gulf, and that'll bring an end to the U.S. presence in the Arabian Peninsula, because they can't stay if there's nothing left. It'll be catastrophic for the Americans. But so that aside, all that aside, so it's not an ideal situation for the United States. But most importantly, I think, Nima, is not a shortage of missiles or a shortage of THAAD missile systems or Patriot missile systems. The real problem is the energy crisis. That is something they don't want to talk about because they don't want to cause panic. But the global reserves are emptying, and there comes a point where you just can't hide it anymore. So the strategic reserves are emptying. The Chinese are using their strategic reserves. Private sector, the governments, everything is being used up, and so we're reaching a point where where the crisis is close, and then you have the added problem of the Bab el-Mandab Strait, and of course the Yemeni-Saudi military conflict. So I think that's even more important than their shortage of missiles because even at the beginning of the war, when they had no shortage of missiles and drones, or at least they had lots more than they had now, they were not winning the war. They were not defeating Iran. They were losing. The 40-day war, the 12-day war, they didn't win any of these wars. They didn't win during the siege. They didn't win during the clashes that we had during the siege period. They didn't win. They haven't won now during the 2 weeks of fighting. with or without their air defense systems, they can't get that. They don't have the upper hand. And they need the upper hand in order to control the Strait of Hormuz and now, of course, the Strait of Bab el Mandab.
Is Iran going to force them to accept to connect all of these issues, all of these conflicts together? Is that going to be possible, in your opinion?
Well, the Iranians won't accept any agreement that doesn't include these issues. So it's either they accept or there's no agreement. And you have the Strait of Hormuz. So the United States has to choose its fate. Iran won't accept any of the elements that were in the MOU to be removed from the table. As I said, Iran will be more demanding, and they will demand certain things up front before they do anything. It won't be like last time round.
General Wesley Clark, which was advocating for, he was advocating for the ground invasion of Iran. Right now, he came out and said, no, ground invasion is not going to work. We have to apply a full blockade on Iran from the north to the south to the east and the west. Is that, does he have the understanding to see what's going on with the geography of Iran, and how is that possible?
Nima, you and I are know Americans who've been in the armed forces, very decent people who can answer that question easily. Smart people who were high up in the military who know that's nonsense. Do you think he doesn't know it's nonsense? Of course he knows it's nonsense. But these people are paid to say this nonsense. There's no accountability. So he's going to be a warmonger and, of course, like surround Iran. Okay, good. I agree. Let's do it. So, how do you shut the Caspian Sea? How do you shut the border with Turkmenistan, with Afghanistan, with Turkey, with Armenia, with Azerbaijan, with Pakistan, with Iraq? I mean, the Americans would need literally millions of troops to do that. This is a huge country. It's very large. It's the size of, almost the size of Europe. How are they going to surround it? And how many of these countries are going to cooperate with the United States? And does the United States even have those resources? Does it have the money to do so? So, okay, yeah, sure. Go surround the country. We'll be waiting to see the American troops surround the country. It's just nonsense. The only thing that I can think of right now is for the Americans either to back down or to continue with this stupid war and continue to drive the global economy into the ground. And then ultimately, when that happens, by the way, that's going to force Americans to give up, because when you have an economic depression, you no longer have the money to keep waging wars, and people at home are going. It's going to grow more unstable at home. So the people are going to be increasingly outraged that their lives are falling apart, and the United States is still waging war. So they will neither have the funding to continue waging the war, and they will have an angry population that will be seeking them out. They'll be looking for to find these people who brought about this catastrophe. But or they will carry out some crazy operation to land an invasion of Iran, and that will fail. The Iranians are waiting, or they'll carry out strikes on Iranian critical infrastructure, which will make the United States look like the monsters that they are, the regime and the armed forces and soldiers of the United States. They'll all be they'll be seen across the world as a bunch of war criminals, like their Zionist allies in Palestine. But that aside, Iran will devastate all of their proxies in the region, and that will bring down the global economy. That will bring down the U.S. economy. So there is no winnable situation. But the most absurd of them all is Wesley Clark's proposal of surrounding Iran. But then again, it's interesting that he says this sort of thing, because Wesley Clark is the famous guy who said that after 9/11, that they're planning to take out 7 countries in 5 years, and the last of them will be Iran. Remember, he was shocked to hear that from one of the generals.
What is your understanding of what has happened between Iran and Ukraine, and
This is
how
a
dangerous is that?
I think this just shows that this is a broader war being carried out by the powers that rule over the West and increasingly have show utter contempt for the people in the West. The war against Russia, the war against Iran, the war against Yemen, the war against the Palestinians, the war against Lebanon, the war against West Asia, all of this is a part of it is a broader war of the empire, a declining and collapsing empire. Zelensky himself is he's expressed that he's a Zionist Jew, uh, and uh, and of course he wants to he wants to show the United States that he's a and the Israeli regime that he's a good tool for them by striking the Iranians and of course the Russians at the same time through this attack. But what he does is that he consolidates the relationship between Iran and Russia and the resistance across West Asia and Russia, because by getting involved in this war uh, is going to inevitably create more unity, and that's not a smart thing to do. So these emotional uh, these attacks based on uh, emotional the emotions of Zelensky, or when he makes it in his anger, or because of his short-sighted uh, policies, where he wants to gain the support of Trump or Netanyahu or whoever. In the long run, they only serve to strengthen the bonds between Russia and Iran, and of course Russia and the collective axis of resistance. And it is not difficult for the Iranians to find targets that belong to Ukraine, because Iran, of course, has its allies have a presence in the Mediterranean, its allies have a presence in the Red Sea, and of course, Iran controls the Strait of Hormuz, and it has enormous access to the Indian Ocean. So Ukraine, Iran does not really need uh, it doesn't Iran doesn't do much trade with Europe, and there's not much that they can do except for carry out further attacks on the Caspian. But the Iranians can effectively shut down Ukrainian trade with Asia.
What does that mean for the ongoing, you know, or the ongoing policies between Iran and the United States, between Iran as a country and the whole West?
Well, Europe doesn't is not important for Iran anymore, and they've made themselves irrelevant, and also by their foolish policies with regards to Russia and Iran and China. They're destroying their own the economies. Their deindustrialization is something that's been going on for 4.5 years now in the heart of Europe. Europe is increasingly becoming unimportant, and the United States under Trump has been slapping them down regularly. So they brought this upon themselves, and Iran no longer really cares. And most of our trade has moved on to Asia. Uh, we don't need Europe, and but Europe needs us, and they need the energy supplies from our region. They need energy supplies from Russia, and they need the technology in China. And the United States is treating them like dirt. But they're too fool. Their leaders are too foolish, and I think we're going to see major change in Europe. Not necessarily change that's going to make things better, because I think the grounds are being laid for fascistic parties to fascist parties to grow. But I think you're going to see more polarization in Europe. You're going to see more division in Europe. Perhaps the European Union in its current form will not continue to exist for in a few years from now. They've brought this upon themselves.